The collared dress shirt, a sewing project that can look intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. Welcome to the Sewing Report. I'm Jennifer Moore, helping you discover your love of sewing crafts and DIY projects. If you love sewing, consider subscribing to this channel for all that and more. And we are wrapping up an ongoing series of sewing a collared dress shirt. Now this series can apply to pretty much any pattern, but for the sake of this, I am sewing M6044. This is a men's collared dress shirt, but there's a few steps and pieces in here that make it a little bit easier than your standard dress shirt. But I've made quite a few videos on this already, so if you are new here and you want to check out some other videos, I've got plenty of technique videos just showing step-by-step how I made this shirt. Now on the surface, this looks like your standard dress shirt, but there's a few things that make it a little more approachable, and that is the back piece does not have a yoke on it, which is a standard part of a dress shirt. Another thing about this pattern is that it does not have a regular placket. They sort of do a faux placket by having the sleeve be two pieces, which I thought was pretty clever. So I'm going to walk you through kind of a wrap up of everything we've been doing to make this shirt. These shirts were actually a Father's Day gift, and I wanted to personalize them with a custom monogram. It's easier to embroider the fabric before cutting out the pattern piece. Between sewing and filming, this was a pretty lengthy project for me, spanning well over a week. Technically, I used 4 sewing machines: the Brother PE 800 embroidery machine, Brother 1034D Serger, the EverSewn Sparrow 25, and my Janome 7700 for the buttonholes. Obviously, you don't need this many sewing machines to make a shirt, but yet, here I am. I've mentioned this throughout the series, but I constantly used my budget pattern weights, which are just washers from Home Depot, my magic pins, which are new, a water and air soluble marking pen, a seam gauge, fabric scissors, and of course, Elmer's washable school glue in a fine tip bottle. While I do have a fancier cordless iron, this $12.99 steam iron from Aldi's was a great find, and I use it all the time. Here's a look back at the techniques featured in previous videos: making and sewing the monogrammed shirt pocket, sewing the shoulder seams and finishing with a flat felt seam, setting in the 2-part sleeve flat, my easy hack for doing a narrow hem, and constructing the cuffs and shirt collar. The only major part of this pattern I haven't featured yet is the button band. One side contains the buttons and the other buttonholes. Similar to the collar and cuffs, you fold in the long side that will not be sewn to the shirt. Pin the bands to the front pieces. Sew with a standard 5/8 inch seam allowance. Trim the folded edge down and fold the band back on itself right sides together. Stitch the bottom short edge to match the length of the hem. trim the seam allowance, clip the end piece, and fold the band over to encase the edge of the shirt. Press, and you can use glue to hold the loose side in place until you edge stitch around the entire band. Mark and sew the buttonholes. I used a seam ripper to open them up. Then sew on the buttons. You can do this by machine, but I chose to hand sew in this case. Now this is only the second collared shirt pattern that I've tried. I tried a Vogue shirt pattern last year for women, and that turned out okay, but I think I used too lightweight of a fabric for that pattern. I think the chambray was a better choice, although I still have yet to make a dress shirt in your average broadcloth or just standard cotton fabric, so that may be next. If you've never made a collared shirt before, I would recommend really try to break down these steps individually and don't try to get overwhelmed. But I found that when I just focused on one aspect at a time, the project seemed a lot more doable to me, and I didn't get too like, oh my gosh, what is happening? But I would label this pattern probably good for an advanced beginner. I wouldn't have this be like your first sewing project ever, but if this is your first time just doing a collared shirt, I think this pattern would be okay for you. If you've also tried this sewing pattern M6044, the men's collared dress shirt, I would love to know what you think below in the comments. And if you have any helpful tips, feel free to share them below. I would love to see what you have to say about it. And I also want to share a couple thoughts on the kind of enjoyability of this project. There are certain patterns that you just feel kind of like happy-go-lucky while you're sewing, and there's others that can be a little bit frustrating. I didn't find this pattern to be particularly frustrating at any point, but I did make a few mistakes going into it. But there's gonna be mistakes with every sewing pattern you try, so just know that going in. I gotta say, finishing this project felt like a huge accomplishment to me, and this is going to be my last video in the series, but if you're just stopping over here, I've got plenty of other videos just breaking down different steps of this pattern, or if you're just making a dress shirt in general, hopefully they'll be helpful. Everything from doing the collar stand and cuffs to setting in sleeves. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the Sewing Report for everything sewing, crafts, and DIY projects. I'm Jennifer Moore for the Sewing Report, and I'll see you guys again in the next video.